just a little bit of background on Dr. Michael Drake. He is the first Black president of the University of California in its 152-year history. And the institution is not new to him. He's actually coming back here and spent much of his career within the UC, but most recently, he was the president of The Ohio State University from 2014 to 2020 and did some amazing things there that I think he'll be talking about bringing here to California. Prior to that, Dr. Drake was the chancellor of UC Irvine from 2005 to 2014 and did some amazing things at Irvine during that period of time that really brought the university to prominence. His degree comes out, his undergrad degree comes out of Stanford, and he is a doctor of medicine and ophthalmology from UCSF, where he spent 20 years as a professor. To his credit, he was born in New York City, raised in New Jersey and in the city of Sacramento. And one of the most interesting things I find is that he's a member of the board of directors of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So I think that gives you a little bit, but it's just a little bit of context for Dr. Drake's career. Dr. Drake, the University of California is really important to the business community, the greater business community, employer community of the Bay Area and our state. As you well know, we've been involved with the university on a number of fronts over the course of the years. We spent some really important work with UC Merced in helping them come up with a financial model to actually finance the development of that campus that we're very proud about. We've worked with UC on international relations, including our work in China. We've done studies with the UC on looking at innovation in the different campuses and contributions to California's economy and jobs in the region. We've done some work together on climate resilience, and we've been an advocate with you on advocacy at the federal level for funds for research and investment. So there's a really strong partnership, and I think a great interest among our members and our friends, as obviously the university plays such a critical role in the state. So with that, let me get, with that background, let me get to you and just maybe give us a couple of minutes, a few minutes on, what's your, big questions, yourself, your leadership style, your vision for the university, why you came back to do this job, and maybe reflect a little bit on your times at Irvine and as at UCSF, and then we'll take it forward and I'll get specific with you about some other things. So welcome, Dr. Michael Drake.
Well, great to see you, and great to have a chance to talk with you, Jim, and to have a chance to talk with and hear from your members. I've been looking forward to this. The few things I'll say, and then again, I'd love your questions, but a few things I'll say is that first, my wife and I are both thrilled to be back in the Bay Area. We, as you mentioned, went to college here. We met in college here, and now in the last century, back in the last century. And I went then to UCSF for medical school. She then went to UC Berkeley for law school, and we raised our family here. Our kids went to local high schools and both of our kids went to college here as well. And so we were really excited about being able to be back. We have family in the area. And honestly, we had a really fascinating, engaging time when we were in the Midwest. We enjoyed that. We were here for decades before we went at a time which kind of toward the end of our career, we went to the Midwest for 6 years, had a wonderful time there, but we really missed, honestly, being around home and family. So coming back to California was something that we were going to do in one way or another. We were sure at some point, and this was a particularly important time, we thought, to return, and to return in an engaged fashion rather than return in a fashion where we weren't so engaged. The challenges that face us all as here in California, or the Bay Area in California, but really across the country and around the world, we're really facing historic challenges, and the opportunity to be involved in trying to help us work through these was something that was too great a pull for us to not roll our sleeves up and see what we could do to help. And I'll say, I think for all of us, we still have some very tough sledding ahead. And I would just say first that I hope that everyone is safe and everyone's family is safe. This is a really challenging time, and anything that I can do to encourage everyone to do all of the things that are available to us today as we're waiting for science and other and public health to help us, things that we can do today, wearing a mask, social distancing, hand washing, those things are going to be so important to all of us over these next several months. And I just really encourage everyone to do that. Let me just pause. We'll have time to talk about Irvine and UCSF, and I'm happy to talk about those things. But let me just, have you make sure I stay on point and have you direct me.
Sure. Well, you started to bring up COVID-19 and the effect on all of us and our families and community, and this has had a huge effect on the University of California already and going forward. So maybe you could kind of take us through a little bit what actions are being taken, how you see the path going forward. What are the implications for the currently and for the future of the university?
Well, it's had a huge effect on the University of California. It's had a huge effect on businesses, large and small. I mean, no one of us is going to work and working in the same way that we would have been normal a year ago. It's different, and I think even as we come back, we'll come back to a different future than the past that we left behind. So I think all of us have changed what we were doing in some cases in profound ways. Some business, as you know, many businesses, particularly small businesses, have shut their doors permanently. Many others have laid people off or cut hours. It's been very devastating to the economy and business. And I will say, just amazed at the resiliency of our communities and how people have kind of come together to keep pressing forward, even in these very, very difficult times. That's very impressive. For universities, we had to turn on a dime, really. We saw the ramping up and then realized that we were at extreme risk, particularly around spring break, for people going out into the world and then coming back to universities and then living in congregate circumstances. And so universities across the country really went to remote learning very rapidly in the springtime, kept that through the spring and the summer. And then most universities opened with most classes remote this fall. For the University of California, the overwhelming majority of our classes are remote. We have clinical instruction and a few other things that take place in person with careful social distancing and proper PPE, but overwhelmingly our classes are remote. And that's been a real big shift for the faculty to change their courses to things they were used to conducting in person to now conducting them remotely. It's been a huge change, of course, for our students who had going to college was sort of something you did, your life changed, you went to college. Now that's been disrupted. The classes are not in person, the classes are online. Our students are at home in most cases, even in the fall, summer on campus, but most are at home, and that presents a very different set of challenges. It's nice to be with your family, but sometimes family obligations can cause things to be difficult. And we find, and this is something that, we know, these are one of the things that COVID has brought to the fore, are things that we know, but now these things are present directly in front of us. One was the digital divide, that some of our students, when they went home to places where they had space and broadband available for their classes. Others, either because of family circumstances or because of where they're living, find it difficult to get broadband or to have consistent access to a computer. And that's critically important now to be able to continue with your studies. And so all of those things we're dealing with in one way or another on a daily basis. I will say that we're very pleased that our enrollments are at about the same level they were last year. We have a few spot areas where the enrollments are down a bit. That's the international students, of course, are down a bit, and some of our non-resident students are down a bit. Some of our graduate programs are down a bit, but overwhelmingly, our enrollments are back where they were a year ago. And in fact, in some cases, our enrollments are higher than they were a year ago. And so we've been able to continue to have coursework and faculty and scholarship and research available for our students. And our students are continuing to move forward and make their progress toward degree, which is one of the central things that we wanted to preserve. Let me say two things. We wanted to preserve the opportunity for students to have progress toward their degrees. We want to do all we could to support our faculty, both in their teaching, but also in their research. Very hard when research stops to crank it back up again. So we want to support our faculty in research. And we want to do all we could to support our working people, our staff, the people who are working on all of our campuses. We have 220,000 employees, and we have done as much as we could to protect those employees, and we want to really continue those efforts going forward. And those are three of the pillars that are central to our decision making. I think you're muted.
It doesn't show as muted here.
Now better. Great.
Better. Okay. I don't know. Technology, not my strength. I hope, I hope the faculty are, adjusting to this, because it seems like a lot. And I myself am a visiting lecturer at UC Davis in the winter quarter every year. I teach a course at the Graduate School of Management in executive leadership, and I'm nervous enough as trying to make believe I'm a faculty member, and now I'm nervous about delivering an online education, and so I feel myself the kind of jump that's involved. Let me ask you about you are the first Black person to lead this incredible institution, and it comes at a time when we're in a period in America where we're really focusing deeply on issues around racial justice and racial equity, and feeling divisions in our society and trying to address that. And we had a measure. The legislature was able to gain the strength to put a measure on the ballot, Proposition 16, to undo the reluctance that Californians felt about affirmative action back over a generation ago. Unfortunately, it didn't pass. And we supported it, and I know that you supported it. And I'm wondering, since we weren't able to pass it, what steps can the university take now, perhaps in addition to what you were doing already, to try to make sure that folks who do come from disadvantaged communities are able to take advantage of this incredible university?
Well, we've thank you. We've always believed, and we've demonstrated that being inclusive allows us to do our work better. We, as a university, always felt that it was important that we gave opportunity to people broadly. We think that access is an important thing, particularly for a public university. It's a part of our founding DNA to provide access to people so that they can educate themselves. And as a public university, we're here to educate people to then give back to the community. So the broader the access that we can provide to people to do that, we think the better. We've also looked and learned and studied that having people from different backgrounds helps us to do a better job of educating ourselves. We learn better in environments where there are people from different perspectives and backgrounds who learn with us. People ask different questions or see things through different lenses. And in your course, I'm sure that the background of the students helps to really changes and enriches the quality of the discussion in the class. So in addition to fairness and giving people the opportunity to benefit from our universities, we find that the quality of our programs is better when we have a diversity and inclusion, different backgrounds there. And then the third thing that we see is that people who come from different perspectives and different traditions and different backgrounds, when they leave the university with their education, they apply that education in different ways. And in fact, in many ways, or many times, the people who come from communities that are relatively underserved or underrepresented go back and then serve those communities by starting businesses there, or in the health arena, setting up medical practices that serve primarily people from communities that the practicing doctors came from or are associated with those communities. And so we find that there was a fairness reason for making sure that we were as diverse as we could be. There was an educational quality reason for that. And then there was a service reason for that. We did better service to our broader communities. Our communities broadly were lifted. And that's been something, you mentioned the kind of focus on social justice that the country has seen over these last several months. But honestly, the inequities have been there every day, all of the past years, and maybe we would drive by them or not pay attention to them, but those inequities have been there every day, and we've been doing what we could to work on them every day. tiny thing that I'll say, about a half a century ago when I was an applicant to UCSF Medical School, this was, in those days, you had to do an applicant statement. You still do an applicant statement, but now instead of one that was downloaded and typed and sent in, they gave you a piece of paper and a pen, and you wrote it out while you waited for the interview. And so they got to test a couple things. Can you spell, you know, and things like that. But you wrote yourself longhand sitting there. And the question that I got way back then was a question about, we didn't use the word, but the question was about disparities in access to healthcare and what should we do about that? That was back in the early 1970s. And so that was my random test question sitting in the library at UCSF all those years ago when I was 20 years old. And those questions still are there for us still today. The social inequities, disparities in care, disparities in opportunity are part of what we deal with every day. And we're going to continue to work to do our best to eliminate those as we move forward.
You know, following on that, given COVID-19 and the fact that, not all, the students in high school are working for the most part remotely, and these issues and the issues around racial justice and equity, are you changing policies around admissions and testing? And, will it be different for someone in high school, tomorrow to get into the UC versus, the way it was before?
Well, yeah, so we have our, all of the basic things that have been in place for years, the grades A through G, the courses that are that we require, all those things are the same. This year, the campuses are using either test optional or test blind for the SAT or ACT courses or test. Let me say that's actually under litigation. So the way that finally comes out at the end, I'll know after the litigation is finished. But we as a university actually had taken a step back from the reliance on tests even last year, and are looking to make sure that tests are, we don't, tests used in a way that would enhance the opportunity for people to make a case to go to university, but not tests that introduced further bias, or in fact, a test that had an inequality of opportunity magnified by the way that people were able to prepare. Then we don't want the tests to be a barrier to entry for anyone. And as a university, we've been rethinking this quite carefully. And as I said, currently there's some technical issues that are the nature of litigation. So I'm always careful about speaking about such things while they're being determined. But our interest is in trying to make the pathway to university as smooth and straightforward as we can. I had the chance when I was leaving my last university, the Ohio State University. I wasn't sure that we were going to be coming here afterwards. It just that the decision process was still underway, and I will say that I actually in my mind hadn't decided what we were going to do. So I went to the commencement address at Ohio State with the concept that that was the last time I was going to do something like this. I had presided over more than 100 commencements at that time, because particularly at Irvine, we had several commencement exercises a year. We couldn't get everybody into the gym. So I'd done it more than 100 times. And I thought, well, this is going to be the last one of these. So what do you want to say? And one of the things I wanted to use as a theme was affordability, access, and excellence. And that we really wanted our universities to be affordable. We really wanted to have broad access, and we really want the universities to be excellent. And that we wanted all of our programs to support all three at this all the time. We wanted always to be affordable, and we didn't want to be affordable without access. We didn't want to be affordable with access without excellence. And we didn't want to do any one at the expense of the others. There was affordability, access, and excellence. And so when we think about the process of applying to and being admitted to the university, access is one of our core principles, and we want to do everything we can to broaden access as much as we can.
So important. That's a pretty powerful three-legged stool. You and I chatted a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that really impressed me was the amount of involvement you had at Ohio State with the local business community. and how much, that was a factor in your role. And, my observation, California is a big state, and we have such an incredible business community here in this region. I don't know that there's any place quite like Bay Area and Silicon Valley. People come here from all over the country and all over the world to figure out what's the secret sauce of this place. Yet, I think in our state, my observation would be that there isn't quite as much connection between our major educational institutions and our business institutions as perhaps there could be for the benefit of both. So I was wondering about your observations about that, and your intentions, and how you see maybe this role as a way to enhance that, if in fact you do.
Well, I certainly do. I hope to be very involved with the business community. As I felt involved with the business community in Irvine when I was there, and very involved in the business community when I was in Columbus. In my role, I was a member of a thing called the Columbus Partnership, which was about 80 of the leading business members in the region. And in fact, the CEO of the Columbus Partnership and the mayor of the city and I were the three co-leaders of a thing called Smart Columbus, a federal grant that the city won to work with business, the university, and the public sector, the public government, to reimagine transportation in the region over the next generation. So a very large effort that the three of us led, and I appreciate that very much. Columbus 2020, we worked with a lot. This was looking broadly on the development of opportunities for employment there. Jobs Ohio, we worked very closely with, and then particularly though the Columbus Partnership and the members of the partnership and I were closely associated in multiple things. So I'd be with one or another of them on some issue every any day of any week, but certainly several times every week for all the time that I was there. I might say, you mentioned that I'm still on the board of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and there were two other partnership members who were on the board of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and we formed a band, and we played with a local band actually several times a year. If I think of the things that I miss the most, I truly actually miss the most, is that the band doesn't get together. We played probably a couple dozen times during my years there, and my other two bandmates, in fact, the band was called the CEOs. It had we couldn't figure out a real name. We played with professional musicians actually to make sure that we were embedded rather than frightening people. But those are members of the partnership from the business community who then were friends and colleagues outside of our working life. So I think that the connections with universities, particularly universities like ours, that were founded for the purpose of lifting the quality of life in our communities, that we're directly connected with the business community on a regular basis, and we hope to continue that.
That's great. And we've got a few musicians amongst us, and maybe we could form a band. I think you'll have to play remotely for a while, but we should get on it. I think we competed for that federal grant that went to Columbus. So we always felt it was sort of politically driven, that there were some advantages to being what folks considered a swing state. We're not. And so we thought that might be behind it, but we recognized that what was going on in Columbus was important, and an opportunity there. Let me turn the subject to the fiscal situation that you face as a university. And right now, obviously, we're not alone in this. Nationally, our state is facing some really tough budget times, and it's hard to know how long this will go. Is this a 1 or 2 year thing? Is it going to go on further? What the ultimate impacts will be, as you said earlier, when we come back, when the dust settles out of the COVID-19 pandemic, things won't be the same. We've got a lot of businesses here where folks are working remotely. To what degree will that be a long-term factor, or how big it will be, and so forth, will all have economic impacts that then turn into fiscal impacts for the state. So how are you, what are you expecting in terms of your budget, and which I guess the governor's budget comes out in mid-January, how are you preparing for that? what are your thoughts about it? The four-year universities of our state are a couple of the only institutions of state government that actually don't have budget protection built into the Constitution one way or another. And so, in the last series of downtimes, if you take a look at the chart, it's not really been a pretty picture for the four-year universities, and I think it's been pretty tough. What are you doing to prepare for this? What can we do to help?
Well, several things. Let me say at the beginning, you mentioned the Smart Cities initiative years ago, and I'll say my friends were in Columbus at the time. It felt like David and Goliath to go up against San Francisco and Portland and Denver and Austin and all these really iconic cities of the future. And so my David friends in that felt very good about coming out the other end of that. And I'd say about the economy and again, everyone who's on the phone or watching you and I, we're all expecting the future to be different. And we are learning some lessons, some things we're doing. We're learning how to Zoom. And although we're going to be Zoomed into oblivion, I think by the time this is done, many of us are the same. I was on an airplane every week for 15 years, literally. And I go to meetings, and I've done like you fly across the country and you go to an hour-and-a-half long meeting and then you go back. I mean, all these things where we spend a huge amount of time working to get together and do things that we actually could do as effectively remotely. And we'll still do things like, I'm sure that we'll find ways and appreciate the importance of getting together and doing retreats and other things that you really just can't do without being together. But I think that some of the things like interim meetings and committee meetings and things we'll be able to do with organizations that have a broad footprint and to do them more remotely. We've certainly seen this in telemedicine. We went from dozens of telemedicine visits a day across our system to now thousands of telemedicine visits. And the telemedicine visit, and the number of telemedicine visits rose dramatically in the spring when we couldn't do elective surgery or see anything but emergency or COVID-related patients during particularly late March, early April. Telemedicine visits rose to be the overwhelming majority of the encounters that we were having with patients. Over the summer, we were able to increase dramatically the number of visits that we were able to see in person. And by the fall, get those back to not at the levels they were a year ago, but approaching those levels. But we still had many times as many telemedicine visits. And so actually by October, we would have more patient visits in a month than we had in October of 2019 when you combine in-person and telemedicine together. So that telemedicine, I think, is quite active and very, very important. And for many of the things that we do, telemedicine works just as well or better and is more convenient, particularly if you're elderly or shut in or a great distance away or infirm. Much of what can be done through telemedicine. So I think that will change the way that we get medical advice and medical care to people. So that, I think, is something that's going to be different. And then budgetarily, we're always under budget stress because we have these two things we're doing. I mentioned affordability, access, and excellence. So excellence tends to be fueled by investment, and education is generally a very good thing. Our universities are very good things. And we're in many cases in the more the merrier circumstance. If there's more investment in us, we can do even more good things even more quickly. But the money is not infinite, and we want to do what we can to keep the costs down. We want to keep our universities affordable for the students who we want to attract and train and educate. And so the tension there is between how much we invest in the universities and the quality of universities, while at the same time keeping us affordable and keeping and allowing us to provide reasonable access. And so those three things all modify each other. They're all in tension with each other as we continue to move forward. And we work best when they're in balance. And we'll continue to look for ways to keep them balanced. This is an extraordinarily difficult time.
All right. Well, you've you've piqued my interest in two areas I didn't plan to ask you about that are medical in nature. So you're an ophthalmologist and very involved in studies around the eye. So in terms of telemedicine, how much applicability is there to being able to work with a patient on issues related to the eye?
Well, so there are a couple things. So first, a lot of telemedicine where a physical exam is something that one can do, like dermatology or other things. You can see things, and a patient can come up and you can look at the patient and evaluate the patient through the screen and through the computer with lots of things. But also a lot of medicine, all forms of medicine, ophthalmology, internal medicine, whatever, the history is a very important part of it. The place where you got the most information on what was going on with the patient in my career always was by talking to the person, saying, what's wrong? We'd start with the history and then do the physical examination, then add laboratory studies, but those were the three things together that would lead to diagnosis. But far and away, the most important was the history, where you'd say, tell me what's wrong. And the patient would tell you what's wrong. And you kind of make your plan going forward. So a lot of our decision-making takes place just in conversation. And then after a patient is treated and the patient's on a treatment course, I specialized in glaucoma. And so I would see people, we'd diagnose the glaucoma, and then we'd follow them to see how things are going. A significant fraction of our follow-up was asking them how they were doing, are they taking their medications, et cetera, et cetera. And those things you can do, in just a few minutes in telemedicine. So a lot of that communicating with patients, listening to patients and guiding them, you could do through telemedicine. For what it's worth, and maybe this is getting on the edge of what I should do, I still have my license, but I've done Zoom visits with my colleagues and a variety. Some have unfortunately had COVID at the time. And, I could look at them and see how they were doing. I mean, just in that little bit. And, gee, you're looking pretty good today. Or, oh, how are things going? And so you get a lot just by being able to look at people and talk to them. And so there's a significant amount of information that is exchanged that way. If you do telemedicine and then a patient needs laboratory studies and they go to a lab and get the labs done, and then the doctor is there with the lab results and the patient in telemedicine, a huge amount of information can take place, or information exchange can take place. So I think that we've found this to be a useful adjunct. Yeah, allows us to see more people in a shorter period of time. Much better for the patient. Forgive me, you might have a 10-minute visit that or a 15-minute visit, but that requires taking a half day off work, driving down to the office, parking, getting up in the elevator, sitting in the waiting room, going in for your 15 minutes and doing all those things to go back. When if you could just get on a telemedicine link, you can do it much more efficiently. So we think that's going to be an active part of what happens as we go forward.
Yeah, thanks. We have a health committee at the Bay Area Council, and actually put forward a really nice webinar a couple of days ago on the state of vaccines for COVID-19. So I thought it was very informative and valuable. But typically the work of the committee over the years has been about the healthcare delivery system, efficiency, affordability, access, and those issues. And it seems like telemedicine, provides a really important opportunity that, it's been mentioned for a long time, but now has become very, very serious very quickly. One other aspect that maybe ties more to the university broadly, and my wife asked, I told her we were doing this discussion, but I asked, well, what should I ask him? And she's a clinical psychologist. So she said, what about the state of mental health amongst the students as well as the faculty in the university? What do you see happening there, and what are you doing to address that?
Well, very important. There are multiple important things that we can talk about, and mental health is actually one of the most important. We find in universities certainly experience this. It's something we see in the world, but we've been working very hard to try to help support our students and our faculty and staff in their mental health needs over these last many years. The demand for services, the need for services becomes ever greater as we move forward. And so that's been a real challenge for us for years. I will share another Ohio experience. I got to Ohio and we looked at the mental health services that were available there. They were pretty good. we're pleased about that, but I wanted to be best in class. You know, I wanted to be competitive. So I looked at it, and one of my first initiatives was to say, what can we do to improve the quality of service? And we we looked at the mental health services that we were providing, counseling, et cetera, for our students. And we increased funding by 30%. And that was a big increase over 1 year. We increased funding by 30%. We found when we increased the funding by 30%, that the demand went up by 43%. And so in fact, a year later, after an increase of 30% in our investment, the lines, or the virtual lines waiting to get in, were longer than they were before we'd done the investment. And this was really something that was almost impossible to keep up with for us. We kept moving, and we're still making changes and doing what we could to make improvements as my time at Ohio wound up. If we take that and layer, like everything else we talk about that's difficult, and we lay on top of that the extra stresses and challenges of COVID, this is as challenging a time, I think, as we've faced as a country. You know, there are all the struggles that we have to, that COVID puts upon us, the public health challenges, the economic challenges, the disruption. All those are very difficult things to deal with. And the way that all of us, people actually broadly, even beyond people, the way that we would deal with stress and these things is really to go and to be with family, to get a hug, or to spend time with people, people who are important to us, people whom we love. And that's the thing that we find most difficult to do. That's the big challenge that we have. And it's almost like the cure for our loneliness makes the problem worse. So I think this is a real challenge for all of us, and we're continuing to work on the campuses, and with a variety of programs. We've set up affinity groups, chat rooms, the availability of online and telemedicine mental health support services, all of the things that we can do to try to keep people together, to keep them healthy, to keep them sane, to keep them encouraged as we move forward. But really, as a society, we have to continue to actively reach out to each other to support each other through this difficult time.
Thank you. That's really important. I think for all of us running organizations and being involved, in the community, we've never seen mental health. It's never been a more important time to make sure we have that, address that consideration. Let me read you a question from one of our members, Jim Hawley. So he says, congratulations, President Drake. Historically, the collaboration between California's universities and the tech and business community has been critical to advancing the state's leadership and innovation. The Bay Area Council's BASIC, that's a Bay Area Science and Innovation Consortium that we lead, played a key role in extending the state's largest energy program, providing $1.5 billion in research funding, much of which goes to UC campuses and our national labs. 15 years ago, tech CEOs and the UC president and chancellors collaborated on winning tens of millions of dollars in state investment in new research facilities and improvements to the state's business climate. With new opportunities in areas like biomanufacturing, carbon-free energy, climate-resilient water treatment, quantum computing, and others, can we rekindle this collaboration?
I think, well, thank you very much. And I appreciate the question and the reflection on how critical our collaboration has been to the quality of life really in our communities and around the world. And, one great thing that Clark Kerr, a few generations before me, Clark Kerr had this great line that I'll quote approximately, but it was that, ideas make the world go around, and the university is still the best place for new knowledge. I think that our knowledge makes the world go round, and the university is still the best place for new ideas. The concept is that our job is to come up with new knowledge that we can then apply to things that make a difference for people. The knowledge on the university campus is interesting and fascinating and terrific, but it really doesn't make a difference until we are connected with people in the world who are bringing products and ideas to market and to fruition. So our connection with the tech industry, with the broad range of industries, is necessary for our work to have a meaningful impact. And I mentioned being in the Midwest. I'll say every place around the world, Silicon Valley, as seen as perhaps the most innovative geography in the world. It's really where no one doesn't in some way use some Silicon Valley connected technology, it seems, in their daily in their daily lives, or at least one person removed. So it's incredibly, it's really seen as a center. And that really is, Silicon Valley wouldn't be Silicon Valley without universities and then the tech companies and development that they spawn. I'm sitting today at Mission Bay, and Mission Bay was, as you know, a kind of a train yard 25 years ago, and is now really a hub of biotechnology, and the university at the center of it. I think it's what brought us to this place today, and it's the pathway to our future.
No, absolutely. I can remember a meeting we had years ago with then Mayor Gavin Newsom, and Mayor Newsom said, you know, the future of San Francisco is in biotechnology. And somebody said, but we don't have a single biotech company in San Francisco. And Mayor Newsom said, we wait and see. And, you know, that was Mission Bay. And, you know, today is just phenomenal what's happened as a result of Mayor Brown that preceded him convincing UCSF to locate the second campus on that old, you know, train yard.
Remember it well. Yeah, remember it well.
Let me ask you a question about you know, you touched on climate change a little bit in the last question. So, you know, here we are in California, probably, you know, certainly the leader in our country on that issue with you know, various strategies, regulations, and initiatives in place to really move the needle to, you know, on this critical issue of our time. And we're seeing the effects of climate change in our state, as we've had for just in the last number of years, the hottest day in the history of the earth, you know, the most fires, serious fires. We've had flood that took out the Oroville Dam, the biggest dam in the country. We've had a drought. This is among the most serious droughts we've ever had. So, you know, this is very, very real. What is the university doing? What are you capable of doing? How can we do it with you?
Well, good. You know, a couple things. First, again, we think of the big challenges that we have in climate change is certainly, and perhaps foremost even among them, things that we really have to be able to control if we're going to continue as a species. And so we're really focused heavily on that. And the university, I believe, is very well positioned to be an active leader in this area. We first have we're a large employer. You know, we're a large part of the communities in which we live. And so we want to practice appropriate behaviors that help us to be better stewards of our own environment. And so we have a great march toward carbon neutrality on our campuses, and we're moving in those directions, electrifying our fleets and doing a whole series of things that we know are the things that we need to do to be responsible leaders in this area. We also are working with the state of California in a variety of areas to do what we can to help the state to achieve its carbon neutrality goals and reduce greenhouse gases, and to do what the state can to help lead the fight against climate change. We at the university could be perfect and be islands of you know, excellence. We have, I think of my former campus is very proud to continually win awards for being among the greenest campuses in the world, certainly in this country. The Sierra Club Cool Campus Award has been won by that campus. It's been top 10 for 11 years in a row, and been the top, I think, 4 years out of the last 6. So really terrific that way. But us being perfect or really outstanding when the state is struggling the climate doesn't stop at the border, you know, of the campus. So we want to continue to work with the state, with the governor, and with a variety of focused, concerned businesses and civic leaders on doing all we can to help move toward carbon neutrality and climate control for the state. We believe very much in things that we can do to help look at forest management and trying to be great partners in looking for more sustainable and safe ways of forest management. We believe in sustainable agriculture. We think that's a really important thing for California. But also, I mean, California is as big and powerful and important and impactful California is for our communities or for our nation. There's a whole wide world out there, and I'm a great believer in the promise of sustainable agriculture to be practiced worldwide in ways that help with carbon capture and carbon sequestration. So that's an important thing for us to do. And I was listening to a podcast or radio show earlier this morning about great challenges that have faced us in the past. And again, thinking of some things that we were involved in at the University of California in the past. One was the broad issue of air pollution in California, particularly Southern California in the 1970s. I remember anybody who were in California at the time, if you go to Los Angeles, one of the comedians once was saying that he lived in LA for a year before he realized there were mountains around the city, which was only partially funny. I mean, it was, you could be there and not see that far. And now if you're there, there are certainly bad days, but many days when the sky is actually clear for miles. I, in Irvine, could stand on a hill out near where my house was on some number of days a year and see the buildings of downtown LA that were 40 miles away, which just couldn't have occurred in the 1970s, 1980s, except to the rarest of circumstances. So we saw that we could do things that we could work on the atmosphere, change lead in fuel, change other things that we were doing, and decrease the amount of air pollution that we could see, at least. And so that we were able to participate in that. The other thing we were able to participate in was the hole in the ozone layer. And again, I'm mentioning my days as chancellor at Irvine. Sherry Rowland, in fact, Professors Rowland and Medina were Nobel laureates for discovering the harm that chlorofluorocarbons could do to the ozone layer. And there was the Montreal Accords came together and said, gosh, there are things we can do to ban these certain chemicals from use in the developed world. And that work took place. And then, whoops, the ozone layer now where the hole was expanding in the 80s has begun to close. And we see an actual change in the atmosphere of the Earth. I mean, amazing thing to think about. And that came from science developed on our campuses, science policy that came from the science developed on our campuses that changed the way people in the world were behaving, and the world's a safer and better place because of it. So we need that kind of science, that kind of engagement, that kind of activity moving forward. And we're dedicated to continuing to be active participants and partners in that effort.
It would certainly seem with a new administration that's interested, and we'll, I guess we'll have a new administration, but we won't get into that because we don't have enough time, and I don't want to put you on the spot. But the stated intention of President-elect Biden is to rejoin the Paris Accord and to engage the United States again in the quest for these to make sure that we have future generations on this planet. And it would seem like the UC system is really well positioned to provide national leadership because we've been at this in partnership with the state for a while. So it seems like, for our laboratories as well as our campuses, it would seem like a lot of opportunity going forward. How do you see, you have these 10 campuses and laboratories, medical schools. It's a really big system spread out over a really big state. How do you see in your role kind of joining this? And this really comes a question from one of the viewers. How do you see it all coming together? Because the campuses have a distinct personalities. Is there an opportunity here to really kind of unite the University of California on this kind of a common theme and brand?
Well, a couple of things there. First, we are a very large system. 500,000 people, 220,000 plus or minus faculty and staff, 280,000 students. So about 500,000 people on a daily basis, 10 campuses and 3 labs. We are involved in everything that you can imagine from A to Z and past and beyond. And there's a great difference, as you mentioned, in the family of campuses and labs and what they're focused on. The labs are science focused, very specific, and leaders really in the world in the work that they do, and we know that and work with them to try to continue to give them the space and a place to be able to do that important work. The campuses, you know, I often say that, gee, if we look at Merced and UCLA, or if we look at Riverside and UCSF, there are similarities, but there are great differences between the campuses. Graduate medical education, one case, a broad campus with mostly undergraduate students in other cases, or a valley, a smallish city in the valley as the hub of your, at a new campus for Merced, or Los Angeles, you know, one of the great largest cities in the world with 100-year-old UCLA at part of its intellectual center. So all of those they have different things that they're different places in their evolution, they have different main areas of focus, they have different trajectories. So if we think about what works for all of them, and the thing that I think about most are really that we share, we have a shared set of values, things that we believe are important as people, that we things we can work on together, or ways that we can work together or with our colleagues that tend to elevate the quality of life in our communities according to our founding principles and the reasons that we were here in the beginning. And it's really bringing together and acting on those values, bringing the enterprise together and acting on those values that I think is a lot the work of the central office, to make sure that we are continuing our focus on access and affordability and excellence, for instance, and that we make sure that all three of those are supported at the same time. That we continue to advocate appropriately for a level of support from those places like the state that are so important to our undergraduate students, no matter which campus they're on, and to make sure that we focus on and that the state and others know the importance of our graduate students, of our research mission. People speak of college, and they speak very often and routinely and importantly about the undergraduate training of people who are there for a baccalaureate degree. Critical to us and really, really important. But equally critical to us is the training of our graduate students and our research scientists, those people who are really creating that new knowledge that's our central product. And we really have to make sure that we support graduate education, support our research scientists, support our faculty in the great work we're doing. And then roughly half of our enterprise is focused on healthcare. And we'll take the COVID crisis that is gripping us now. So as we speak, there are people being tested and treated and cured, or not cured from COVID, but supported through their time through their COVID illness to make sure that we can return them to a healthy life as soon as possible. And we're working on vaccines and antivirals to make it that we can both control this pandemic and do everything we can to prevent other pandemics. I didn't mention public health, which is a critical part of that, and on and on. So there are all of these things that we are focused on that are there to lift the quality of life for our fellow citizens, and to really add knowledge to the weapon that we can use to help make our world a better place. And I think that central value really ties us together as a university community.
Okay, we've only got 3 or 4 minutes left, so I'll be really quick. You know, you came from Ohio State. So I used to think that was just football. I didn't realize they actually had academic program. No one ever told me, but now you and I, you know, you've shared. But what about sports at the University of California? Where does that fit in?
I will say, just for the Ohio State University, you know, the athletic budget, one of the largest in the country, was about 3% of the budget of the enterprise, and 97% was the other things. And maybe we spend a little more time on athletics proportionally, but 5% maybe, and 95% of the time really was spent on other things. And so it was always interesting to me that I know that because of the fact that it was among the largest collegiate sports programs in the world, and everybody could see you and what you were doing, that's what it looked like to a lot of people from a distance. On the ground, we were doing all the things I just mentioned to you. We're doing our best with science and patient care and educating undergraduate and graduate students. I'd say that you know, athletics and sports are a really important part of the American psyche, a part of that mental health that you mentioned, and the sports as glue. You know, I have a minute. I want to say this. This will be a different topic. It's one where people don't believe what I'm going to say, so I'm going to try to underline it. So I was at a place that had an incredibly successful, incredibly large athletic program. I was the chair of the board of the NC2A, and we were very involved in these things. The value of the sports, but the sports program wasn't for money. The value of the sports program wasn't for profit or for margin or for money, to be honest, to me at all. We wanted to break even, at least. We wanted to be able to pay for itself. But we didn't think of money from the sports program as something that was a source of revenue for the institution. What it was a source of pride and connectivity and culture. It was something to celebrate. I'm in the Bay Area, we would celebrate Bay Area professional teams, the Giants or the 49ers. We as citizens don't think of, gosh, we're really happy when the 49ers win because of the economic benefit that it brings to the city. We're great, we want the enterprise to be successful, but we really had pride in this, in being able to come connected as a community to root for someone or something that we can all celebrate together. So I think the collegiate sports are really important for that, because they help to build a sense of connectivity and community. And that was the part of it that meant the most to me when I was there. It meant the most to me when I was at UC Irvine, and we would celebrate championship teams in sports where we didn't break even. We still loved it and celebrated them, and liked being able to come together and root for our community, whether it be anteaters or bears or banana slugs or gauchos. You know, that's the thing that brings us together and makes us all root for those things. The challenge now, and this is that going back to the COVID challenge I mentioned before, the challenge now is to be what can be done safely. And I think that's a challenge that the country is facing really on a daily basis. And I just say again that for all of us, that practicing COVID safety is the most important thing that we can do to protect ourselves and protect our communities. And the best way to get to a future that looks like the past that we love so much is to be very vigilant today and wear our masks, socially distance, take care of ourselves, protect ourselves during Thanksgiving. You know, we're in this for the long haul. And I think that's the most important thing for us to do.
Well, Dr. Drake, you started and finished on the same point, which I think is the critical point as we head into the Thanksgiving holiday, to remind folks that, you know, it's these kind of big indoor gatherings that really seem to spread the virus. And, you know, so I really appreciate the reminder on behalf of our members. So we are out of time. I want to thank you very much for doing this, but this is just an opener. And I believe you're a member now of the Bay Area Council Board. So we want to have an interaction with you and work with you and have you come to us for support in all the ways that we can be supportive, which I think are significant. And I look forward to you know, being your friend and your colleague here in the Bay Area and in California. So thank you for doing this today. Really appreciate it.
Wonderful. Look forward to working with you. Stay safe, everyone. See you soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks everybody. Have a great day and a great week. Bye.